Hey everyone, it's Nikolai Pavlov. This will be the second part of my video introduction to DAX. And in this video, we'll actually start building a few different formulas. Before jumping in, however, let me focus on the syntax of the language. Take a look at the formulas below. When building DAX calculations in Power BI, there are different calculations when you're using calculated columns and measures. When building calculated columns in DAX, you don't necessarily need functions. If you type a reference to a column within a table, it will return values from that column for each row. That happens because calculated columns understand the row context and they evaluate for each row in the table. Let's take a look what I mean in the example. So we have the same table from my last video, simple sales table. And let's build a calculated column using DAX. In my example, we will create the column name revenue. Let's write down calculated column revenue. So after I put the name of my column, all I need to do now is refer columns that I need. So in my case, I need to multiply the column quantity by the column price to find out revenue. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I will start typing quantity. I will recommend using the intelligence autofill function. It can be quite helpful when choosing between tables and columns, and all you got to do is press the tab key to select to make the right choice. All right, so after I choose the quantity column, right, I multiply it by price. And here, keep in mind that it could be any operation. It could be multiplication. I could have used a plus sign, a minus sign, a division, more, less, equal to, and all the other operators, right? So, but in my case, I really need to multiply that. All right, I choose these two columns from this table, and then I press OK. And here I have my revenue column here. I will format my column as United States dollars. So in this case, my calculated column understood the row context and evaluated each row for the columns quantity and price, and multiplied each row of each column by each other, and then I have the new column. Now, when creating measures, on the other hand, you need to have some function, because Power BI will not understand what you're trying to do with that single value. This goes back to the fact that measures, unlike calculated columns, actually do not live in tables, and therefore they cannot be referred without having a function. If you look at the second measure, the sum formula, right? It equals to the sum of a column in a table. For example, it could be the measure named total quantity, which equals to the sum of the column quantity in a sales table. Let's take a look. You can build measures from the data view right here. Above, under the modeling tab, there's the new measure button right here. Or you can do it from the report view. You can have a measure button right here under the modeling tab, and then you can also click the right mouse button next to the table, and then there's new measure. As a first example, let's build a measure for a sum of revenues. So the first thing is to put the name of a measure. In my case, it's a sum of revenue. It's important to remember that every DAX formula starts with the equal sign, just like an Excel formula, followed by some function name, right? It could be sum, count, average, whatever. In my case, in this example, it's going to be a sum function. So sum of revenue equals, we type sum. Now I have to pick a table and a column name. So I am summing revenue. Table 1 calculated column revenue is the column I need. I press tab, close brackets, enter. Now I have my measure ready. I personally prefer to put a visual, for example, like a table or something, and then put measures in there so I can see right away what they're equal to. Okay, let's format measure real quick. I click on the measure and then I can format it. Let's put it a $sign right here. Right here. And now I have $532. This is a sum of all the revenues right here. Let's say I would like to count the number of items sold. So I would like to count the number of items under the quantity column. The name of the measure is number of items sold. And formula, the function is count. And then I'll be counting all products. No, all quantities, sorry. I'll be counting items under the quantity, under the column quantity, right? So I'll pick that, tab, okay. Now let's put that measure that I created in the table. Number of items. As you can see, there are 18 items that I sold. Let's go back to data. Yeah, it looks about right. And finally, let's create one more measure. Let's say I would like to know how many distinct products I sold during this time. So I want to count all the distinct values under the column product ID, right? So let's do that. I create measure. Let's name it distinct products equals, there's one formula called distinct count right here. And I will be counting the column product ID. So I put my measure in there. And I can see that I have 6 distinct products. If I go to my table, yeah, it looks about right. There are over 200 DAX functions and operators in Power BI, but have no fear, as the knowledge of around 30 different functions should be good enough to do really everything you need to do in a report in most cases, especially as a business user. One could divide DAX functions into 5 major categories, right? So it's math and statistics, logical, text, filter, and time and date functions. Most of these functions will look familiar to Excel functions, and people who worked in Excel will find them very familiar. If you look at the first category of math and stats functions, for example, these are pretty much basic aggregation functions, that evaluate at the row level, right? Logical functions are such as if, and, or, not. These are functions for returning information about values in a given conditional expression. Text is pretty simple. I mean, these are functions to modify text strings or control formats, right? For dates, times, and numbers. And then you have a very important category of filter functions. These are essentially lookup functions based on related tables and filtering functions for dynamic calculations. We will take a look more carefully at the function calculate and filter in my future videos. I mean, these are very important 2 functions. And lastly, there are date and time functions. These are important functions to do any sort of time intelligence calculations. Alright, hopefully you learned about DAX in this video. We looked at creating calculated columns using DAX, and also created 3 different measures using the basic functions of sum, count, and distinct count. Consider subscribing to my channel and have a great day. See you in my next video.